All right, hey guys, welcome back to Unit 6. This is video number 2. In this video, we are going to talk about culture from the ground up. In fact, I haven't even drawn our normal machine. I've got a bunch of houses. Sometimes I wonder, and I've got a big what does not at all look like a mass media broadcast antenna, broadcasting messages to our households. But this is what we've got. This is what we're going to deal with this as best we can. And I've got a long definition of subculture that I'll get to in a moment. We've got 4 points, and because of all this chaos, I'm going to make it very, very clear what our 4 points are. First of all, culture comes from interactions, which is going to make sense if you put it in the context of the Sapiens stuff we read at the beginning of the semester. All there is nature and human beings. So any meaning, any understanding we get is coming from other people. So point 1, culture comes from interactions. Point 2, subcultures, which we will get to. I'll define it over there for you. Point 3, we are all parts of subcultures. And point 4 is that we can think of our dominant culture as the overlap among a bunch of different subcultures. That'll make sense in a moment. Let's start out with this idea, point 1. Culture comes from interactions. Now, if we think about this, of course it does, because you're born and you are taken home from the hospital and boom, you're right there in that house. And you're a baby, so you don't understand or know anything. Every thought that needs to end up in your head is going to come from the interactions that you have with other people. Now, I have described this in the past as being an individual inserted into a machine, and we've got the symbolic universe and the collective consciousness, and those are the thoughts that end up there. But let's be specific about how lives actually work. It's in this house that a baby turns into a child and is getting bombarded constantly at first with interactions, defining things and developing ways of understanding. We're still dealing with symbols and beliefs here, coming almost exclusively from parents. Then, as that kid branches out and maybe goes to a school, which we will make as a bigger building right here, all of a sudden, that kid starts to have interactions with other people who may reinforce the same thoughts and beliefs that the parents did, but may also differ in some ways. If you are a kid who is born Catholic and you go to this school and all of a sudden you meet a Hindu person, that's a new interaction which is the possibility of changing your understanding of the world in some way. But again, it's all based in interactions. So we start out in the home, we move into the community in a bigger way. And of course, this is important as well. You've got nowadays, and I mean, obviously it's super important. We have mass media over here, which is in a very complicated electronic way, individuals interacting with other individuals. You sit down to watch a movie, and there is somebody who wrote a story, some other people who are acting it, and they are interacting with you. It's a relatively one-direction interaction, but that still is, at the end of the day, it's humans interacting with other humans. In this case, the people who are able to contribute to the stories and ideas that are communicated over the mass media have a lot more reach than just mom and dad here or a teacher or classmate over here. They can interact with a whole bunch more people. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, my phone alarm went off. They have a lot more reach than this, but it still is interaction. So every idea that ends up in this kid's head comes from interacting with another person. Parent direct interaction, indirect interaction through the mass media, even through books. But it's all interactions with other people. Okay. And this is happening, this is multiplied times 100 million households in our society, where every one of these homes has got kids who are learning from their parents, and then they are interacting with each other, interacting with the mass media, and all of these thoughts and all of these thoughts, all of these meanings are taking root inside those heads. at the end of it, what we end up with is pretty much everybody in that house more or less thinking the same. I know there's conflict among families. I get that, but for the sake of making this a slightly smoother explanation of this process, let's assume that mostly there's overlap here, and probably among these homes there's a large degree of overlap. But if you multiply this out over the entirety of the American population, you're going to have some households that have a lot of overlap and some that have less. I'm going to illustrate this by saying, let's just deal with a religion right now. So let's deal with the religion of Protestantism. And let's say that this house is Protestant, and this house, 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 and this one. And let's say that this house is Hindu, and so is this one, and so is this one. And let's say that this house is Jewish, and this one's Jewish, and this one's Jewish, and this one's Jewish. What we have, and we'll make this one Jewish as well, what we have here now is American society in terms of its religion. And what we can see are groupings of people who are going to have a particular understanding of the world that's slightly different than other people. It's not that Protestants and Hindus in America don't see anything the same. They overlap in a lot of ways, but there are some differences. What we are going to talk about these people as is being a part of different subcultures. And we could actually draw those. What I could do is to visually represent this. The subculture of Protestantism would kind of look like this. The subculture of Hinduism would kind of look like this. The subculture of Judaism would look like that. Okay, so this is what we're talking about when we talk about a subculture. And now we'll get to our definition. So we've dealt with point number one. Culture comes from interactions. And using religion is not the only type of subculture, but it's one that is fairly easy to understand because we understand that these groups are going to see the world in slightly different terms. Really importantly, it's not radically different terms, but slightly. So a subculture. Subculture, it's got the word culture in it, so we're dealing with meanings here. A system of meanings that differ to some degree from the dominant culture. Now, what we're talking about with regard to any of these, even Protestantism, America's mainstream dominant culture is you could make an argument that it isn't, but I'm going to, at least right now, make the argument that it is a non-religious, it's a secular culture. To the extent that these households are particularly religious, they differ to a degree from mainstream American culture. So they subscribe to a system of meanings that differs to some degree. Again, not totally different. These people still believe that it's wrong to steal things from your neighbor's house just because you like what your neighbor has. These people still believe that you should treat all people equally. But they do conflict or differ's the right word, differ from mainstream American society in terms of being more religious than what our dominant culture is. Okay, so a system of meanings that differ to some degree from the dominant culture that is held by a subgroup within a larger population. And you can see the subgroups here. Well, I think that is all I want to say about point 2. Let me just check with my script. So within a population, even though there is a machines culture, which again, this is not saying that whole machine thing was wrong. This is just demonstrating how we are going to end up with that dominant culture that we have. It starts with interactions. Interactions are the basis of belief, and now we have these subcultures. Point 3, we are all parts of subcultures. So if I were to erase right now these religions, which I am going to, I think I'm kind of winging this right now, I will do this. Let's get rid of religion so that we're talking about a different sort of subculture right now. Let's talk about, although I'm going to make them still within these particular groupings. I don't think I need to be drawing this up over and over every time. Let's make, I'm just realizing I could have left the H's. Let's make, oh my gosh, I could have left the P's too. All right, this is what happens when we wing it. So let's look at schooling right now. So these are public schools. I should have just left the P's. These are families that believe in the public school system. But what we're also going to have are a small number of families, and let's make these the blue families, that homeschool. Where are my other blue? Now, it's even easier to see how both these type of schooling groups are going to be, well, the homeschoolers are going to be a subculture. My family homeschools. And so we don't differ from mainstream dominant culture in very many ways. We're not out stealing things. We treat people equally. We believe in all that stuff. We just believe that we will do a better job educating our kids than sending them to a public school. No offense to the education majors in the group. In this case, let's actually, we're going to get rid of purple and make these people also be public, 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 public. Now, in this case, the P's are not really a subculture. They are members of the dominant culture. Most people in America, even if you don't love our education system, most people in America believe that it is, I mean, some people believe it's the best education system in the world. Most people believe that putting their kid in it is going to be at least good enough. So in this case, we really have one subculture, the homeschoolers, and everybody else there is part of the mainstream dominant culture. So I'm a homeschooler. I'm a part of that group. I'm also a soccer fan, and I could do this for, like, what's your favorite sport? I'm not going to do that. Suffice it to say that soccer is not the most popular sport in America, but makes me a part of a subculture. I'm a metalhead, so I'm like playing metal guitar and listening to metal music. Again, part of another subculture. And you can think about the ways in the different sorts of system of meanings that differ slightly. Some of you, some of my students are dancers. That's a subculture. It's a population that believes that is the way that you should be spending your time. Sorry, my phone keeps going off. That is how we should live our lives. Live our lives by that sort of physical movement. And you can think of anything that you are a part of as well. Most of us are parts of multiple subcultures. Okay, that's point 3. So we dealt with that it comes from interactions. We dealt with subcultures, what it means. Third is that we are all parts of subcultures. Fourth, we can think of our dominant culture if we go back and erase all of these letters now, and all we have are the houses. All of these houses, whether we are talking about their school, their religion, whatever we're talking about, let's just have these houses again. All of them are going to be parts of multiple subcultures, right? But all of them, almost all of them at least, believe that we should treat people equally, believe that the government should not be able to just take our stuff away, that we should be free from being harassed by the government. So let's just deal with those two, that individual freedom and that idea of equality. If all of these have some degree of non-overlap. Remember, these people were Protestant, these people were Hindu or Jewish, I can't remember which they were. These people homeschool, these people are public schools. So there are differences. But if you look at, okay, so let's count all the hundreds of beliefs that exist in this population, and let's find the overlap. That overlap, where we wouldn't have a subculture, where everybody's part of the same thing, That's the dominant culture of a society. That's the mainstream culture. And that is what, now put yourself back into the drawing that we usually have, that's what gets put up there on that left side for culture. It's the overlap among these. So what we've done is built from the ground up, from individual households. We've built up to where we get that culture for the machine that I'm pointing to right now that isn't there. It's usually over there. That's it. That's what we've got. This is the ground up view of where our culture comes from. We're over 15 minutes, which is too long. I'll be back for one more video. It will be very, very short because I've got one point to make. I'll see you then.